Welcome everyone, I'm Collins Rex and I'm one of the organising committee members for the Australia and New Zealand South African Film Festival that of course is running in those two countries from the 12th of May to the 24th of May. And the film festival features 17 films ranging from documentaries to features to shorts, and we are absolutely delighted today to be joined by the writer director of one of the films of the festival. That film is an extraordinary film called Sides of a Horn. Welcome and thanks for joining us, Toby Wosskow.
Thanks so much, Collins. And just to shout out, right before we got on here, Collins told me that she was one of our Kickstarter backers way back in the day. So just a shout out to you and thank you so much for making this film possible.
Oh no, look, anything that one could have done to help to bring this amazing project to life. And you know, how many Kickstarter members did you say you had? Over 200 people contributing?
Yeah, 235 people, I think from like 10 different countries. And yeah, it was truly a global effort. It was so incredible to see it come together.
Extraordinary. And you ended up making what is quite a remarkable film on hardly any money at all. I honestly don't know how you did it. But Toby, tell us about Sides of a Horn. Why is it that this movie is important? Why did you have to make this? Why did you have to tell this story?
Well, personal story of how it came together. I was traveling, just adventuring, vacationing in South Africa, and went into a park with a game ranger, and we came across a rhino. And first of all, it was one of the most magnificent things I've ever seen, a rhino out in the wild in South Africa. And then he started telling us about the poaching war and how this 50 million year old species was on the brink of extinction. And then from there, we went into one of the communities that was bordering that park and met a few people, sort of community elders, who started telling us about how the poachers become poachers and how the game rangers often come from the same community, and how they've even heard stories of people from the same family being on opposite sides of the poaching war, a ranger and poacher, like in our story. And so quickly after that, I come from a documentary background. I'm more focused in narrative now. And so my vacation adventure turned into a bit of a research trip, and started doing interviews with people, just recording them on my phone, knowing that I wanted to do something with the story. And then got back home, which is the US, and started to do more research and sort of realized that there was a ton of conversation and a lot of articles about the multi-billion-dollar international illegal wildlife trade, but nobody was talking about these communities that border the parks, which is really the front lines, which is the people that I had met. And so it really came from a place of nobody was telling their story, and that's really the heart of it. And so wanting to humanize those people and get their story out there.
And it is a story which I think very few people are aware of or even want to be aware of, because it's uncomfortable. We all know the one side of the story. We see the horrific images of rhinos having been poached, slaughtered for their horns, sometimes the horns taken while the animals are still alive, and that we all see. But we tend to forget that there's a demand for the horn, and there are people that supply that demand, not necessarily through being evil human beings or not caring about the animals, but through necessity, because they have families to feed, and this is a way for them to get some money into the pot to do that. So to see the juxtaposition of the two sides of the same family, one on the right side and the other one on the wrong side, is really very interesting and actually quite confronting, I think, for all of us that think we know the whole story and
Yeah.
are rightfully outraged by what we see, but we don't know the backstory of how it gets there. So you were a documentary filmmaker. You get to South Africa, you see the rhinos, you talk to the people, you get a sense of there's more to this than just the end product of what
Yeah.
happens there. What makes you decide to go from making a straight doco on the subject to it being a narrative and actually telling the story?
Yeah, I mean, it was, first of all, what you just outlined is exactly the message that we were trying to get across with the film. So I'm glad it resonated and you interpreted it that way. It definitely is. Most of the conversation that we've had after the film, because we've partnered with the African Wildlife Foundation and Wild Aid, and a lot of the conversation is about options or therefore the lack of options in these communities, and therefore needing to turn to poaching because there is no other way out. And so yeah, it was great to hear you talk about the film in that way. But deciding to do it as a narrative film, not a doc, was very much where I was at as a filmmaker at that time. I had sort of decided that my passion was more so in scripted narrative filmmaking, less in doc. But I think for those who will see the film, you'll see quite a documentary approach to a narrative film, probably as close as you can get to doing a narrative film while keeping some documentary approaches. So most of the characters in the film were non-actors, just people from that community that we filmed in, which was a real community where poachers and rangers come from. That was a real park where there's a lot of poaching incidents. The first morning that we began filming in the park, we had to pause because there was a little baby rhino that was poached. And so our technical consultant, who was the head ranger of the park, had to go off and try to find these poachers. And we were just like stranded in the park while he went and dealt with the very real issue that we were telling a fictional, albeit based on actual events, film about. And so the decision to make the narrative film was also, there's a lot of docs that have explored these issues of environmental issues, wildlife crime issues, poaching specifically. Like Ivory Game was an incredible movie. There's others, but nobody's really done a narrative film. And so I think doing it narrative opens it to a new audience that maybe are not so interested in docs but are open to watching a dramatic narrative cinematic film. But I mean, I have equal respect for docs and narrative films. I watch as many docs as I do narrative. But I do feel that it was the fitting time and the fitting story to do this narrative, and also just personally in my career, that's where I was going.
Well, it's a human story, so I guess telling it in a human form made a lot of sense. And of course,
Definitely.
you're English speaking. Um, you decide to make the film in Zulu. Uh, that must have been an extraordinary challenge for you to work with, first of all, non-actors in a language that you don't speak and don't understand. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it helped because, well, so we had this incredible translator who was also our script supervisor. His name was Linda, and he grew up in a township much like the one that we filmed in, and he spoke incredible English, but was a native Zulu speaker, um, and so and we spent a lot of time working on the script together before shooting, because I had written all my dialogue in English, and just translating those words into Zulu, they don't have the same meaning, you know?
Absolutely.
And so we spent a lot of time like really, really getting on the same page of changing the dialogue, making sure it worked in English and in Zulu. And so then going into the field with him and having absolute trust in the fact that he would tell me if the actors ever went off book. And so, and I totally gave them the freedom to, and they did improvise quite a bit. But then he would come to me at the end of the take and say, "Hey, just so you know, Salo went off book on this line. He said this instead of that," and we would decide whether that was okay or not. But it allowed me, not knowing what words were coming out of their mouth, just to watch their physicality, to watch their emotion, to like be in the scene with it instead of thinking, oh, he went off book there, or oh, like he should say
Yeah.
that instead of this. And so I found it really freeing. And I mean, I would love to direct more films, foreign language, but it completely depends on finding the right translator, script supervisor. So I wouldn't want to ever go into it without finding that perfect person, you know?
Well, it sounds as if your experience was a very communal one.
Definitely.
You come up with a concept, you write a script, you work with somebody who translates that script, and you're very dependent on them to get the messaging that you were actually intending to get it right.
Hmm.
But you also worked very closely with the local community because you lived and breathed this. You were part of the community for the time that you actually made the film. And I've seen some photographs of you meeting the king. So you have a really great relationship with the community as you're making the
Yeah.
film. Have you, and last year, as we understand, was a strange year, but have you kept in touch with the community and the people that were involved in the making of the film?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, more so the South African producers than me, although I'm social media and WhatsApp with everyone. But the South African producers, and so we basically we got connected. Like you said, uh, the local leadership of the tribe there. There's a queen mother and the princes, and we and once you get their buy-in, then you get the rest of the community on board. And so we were fortunate in that one of our South African producers knew one of the princes, and so we went into this meeting and we pitched the movie with a translator to the queen mother, who um, gave us her blessing, and then we really made the film with them. And so the South African producers with the prince, who became an associate producer on the film, went back to the community and did a screening there for everyone who was involved. And I wasn't able to be there, but it sounded like it went incredibly well, and everyone was so excited, and the film was so well received, and hopefully also stirred up some conversation, since that is a community where poachers and rangers come from, and it's bordering one of those parks. And so, and also beyond that, we have screened all over the African continent, in different areas where there are rhino and wildlife crime. And we did we received a grant from the Mandela Washington program, which is an African US program, to take the film to Uganda for a week. And we did community screenings there. And that was interesting because Uganda is, their rhino went extinct, but they're starting to reintroduce new rhino, bringing them from other parks. And so it was a good opportunity to have these conversations before the rhinos start to be reintroduced to the wild, so that we can talk about how history doesn't repeat itself. You know, these rhinos that are getting a second chance don't go extinct like they did last time. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been we've had a lot of community screenings and a lot of conversation where it matters most. So it's been great.
That's wonderful, Toby. And it really is an amazing piece of filmmaking. It's such an important story to be telling, and we're delighted to have it as part of the South African Film Festival in Australia and New Zealand. Um, as we wrap up our chat today, if you can tell us why it is that people need to come and see this film, why they need to get their ticket online and watch it and share the message as far and wide as possible.
Yeah, well, one thing that really gave me a lot of drive to get this film made and tell this story was, I had been in these communities and I'd met some of these people living on the border of the parks, and saw the dilemma that they were put into. And they're human beings. They have families that need feeding. They have sick parents, sick children, and this is the only opportunity, the only option that is presented to them. And then coming back home and reading about and talking to different people who are like big advocates of wildlife, who were talking about the best option being to buy more guns and kill more poachers, which is a big phrase that's thrown around, and something that a lot of people really believe. I think that watching this film may change your mind and may just make you think about more sustainable solutions and more humane solutions, because we do need solutions, but I don't think buying more guns and killing more poachers is that solution. So I hope that it can open some people's eyes in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Toby. And I think absolutely, if the film manages to get people just thinking about the solutions rather than just wiping out the problem,
Right.
I think it'll be a better world for all of us, and certainly for the rhino. It's been
Definitely.
delightful chatting to you. Thank you so much. I think we could be talking for a lot longer, but there's so much more that we can explore.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us and for being part of the South African Film Festival. And we wish you all the very best for your future projects. And I know you've got some exciting stuff in the pipeline. So people watch the space. You never know what we have coming up next from Toby and his crew. Thank you for joining us. And
thank you so much. And thank you again for your Kickstarter contribution. You made the film happen, and I hope you have a great festival.
It's only a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Toby. You have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.